Hello, boring dreamers. Today, we are traveling back to a sunny, suffocating Sunday in June 1914 to witness the most consequential wrong turn and perhaps the most fateful lunch break in human history. We are going to Sarajevo, where a comedy of errors, a lack of security, and a very debatable ham sandwich will conspire to burn down the entire 20th century. You probably won't survive this. Between the amateur bomb throwers, the angry mobs, and the looming threat of trench warfare, your odds are statistically zero, but at least you will get a front row seat to the end of an era. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop a comment telling me where you're rewatching from and what time it is. I love seeing the global map of insomniacs lighting up. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on the railway platform in Sarajevo. It is shortly before 10 a.m. on June 28th, 1914. The sun is already beating down with a relentless, stinging intensity, baking the dust on the station floor and heating the iron rails until they shimmer. It's going to be a scorcher of a day. You adjust your collar, which feels tight and sweaty, and look around. The air smells of coal smoke from the steam engines, unfiltered tobacco, and a palpable vibrating tension that seems to hum just beneath the noise of the crowd. A whistle blows, sharp and piercing, echoing off the surrounding hills. The Imperial train is arriving. It is a gleaming beast of black iron and polished brass, hissing steam as it grinds to a halt. This isn't just a commuter line. This is the physical manifestation of the Austro-Hungarian Empire rolling into town. The doors open, and out steps the man of the hour, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He looks heavy. That's the first thing you notice. In this sweltering Bosnian heat, he is dressed in the full, stifling regalia of a cavalry general. He's wearing a tunic of cornflower blue, black trousers with red stripes, and a helmet adorned with bright green peacock feathers that bob absurdly when he walks. He looks like a man dressed for a parade in a cooler climate, not for a diplomatic mission in a Balkan pressure cooker. Beside him is his wife, Sophie. She looks elegant in white silk, holding a parasol, smiling nervously. She shouldn't technically be here receiving royal honors. Her blood wasn't royal enough for the stiff etiquette of Vienna, but today is their anniversary, and this trip is Ferdinand's gift to her. A day where she can finally be treated like an empress. You follow them as they move through the station. There is a red carpet, a military band playing the anthem a little too loudly, and the local dignitaries bowing low. It all looks perfect on the surface. But if you look past the feathers and the brass, you can see the cracks. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. The date, June 28th, was arguably the worst possible day to visit Sarajevo. It was Vidovdan, St. Vitus Day, a sacred Serbian holiday commemorating the Battle of Kosovo in 1389. For the local Serb nationalists, this day was a time of mourning and national pride, remembering their defeat by the Ottoman Turks and vowing to reclaim their freedom. For the Austrian Archduke to parade through town on this specific day in full military uniform was seen as a deliberate, arrogant provocation. It would be like a British king visiting Dublin on St. Patrick's Day in 1916 wearing an orange sash. It wasn't just a visit. It was a slap in the face. You walk out of the station and onto the street. You expect to see a wall of soldiers. You expect bayonets fixing a perimeter, police dogs, maybe a sniper on the roof. Instead, you see nothing. Well, not nothing, but shockingly little. There are a few local policemen in their dark uniforms, looking bored and overwhelmed, leaning against lampposts. The crowds are pressing right up to the curb. There are no barricades. There are no soldiers lining the route. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether this lack of security was gross incompetence or a sinister conspiracy. Some theories suggest that rival factions within the Austro-Hungarian government, perhaps even the Hungarian Prime Minister Count Tisza, wanted Ferdinand out of the way because his plans to reform the empire threatened their power. Did they intentionally leave him exposed? Or was General Podgoric, the local governor, just too arrogant to ask for help? Standing here, watching a peasant wander across the street, 10 feet from the heir to the throne, it feels less like a conspiracy and more like the standard bureaucratic laziness that plagues all empires before they fall. You spot a group of young men in the crowd. They don't look like they are here to cheer. They look pale, sweaty, and intense. They are wearing ill-fitting suits. One of them has his hand jammed deep into his pocket. You instinctively want to shout a warning, but your voice is lost in the sudden roar of Vivio, long life. From the loyalists in the front row, the contrast is jarring. You have the pomp and circumstance of the Habsburgs, the dying breath of the 19th century colliding with the angry, violent energy of the 20th century. The Archduke is waving his white-gloved hand, completely oblivious to the fact that he has just walked into a shooting gallery. A quirky fringe tidbit about the arrival involves the Archduke's superstitious nature. Ferdinand was obsessed with the occult and lucky charms. It is said he carried 7 distinct talismans on his person at all times to ward off evil spirits. On this trip, he was reportedly wearing a specific amulet that he believed made him bulletproof. As you watch him step into the sunlight, the green feathers on his helmet catching the glare, you have to wonder if he checked to see if the amulet had an expiration date. The motorcade is forming up. It's a small procession, just 6 cars. The engines are sputtering to life, coughing blue smoke into the hot air. The Archduke and Sophie are guided toward the 3rd car in the line. It's a luxury vehicle, a symbol of modern technology, but as you get closer, you realize it has a fatal flaw. You hurry to catch up, your boots crunching on the gravel. The station is behind you now. The safety of the train is gone. Ahead lies the Appel Quay, the long road that runs along the river. It's a straight shot to the town hall. It looks like a parade route. To the boys waiting in the crowd with bombs in their pockets, it looks like a target range. You take a deep breath of the Sarajevo air. It tastes of dust and destiny. The clock is ticking, the sandwich is waiting, and the world is about to break. You walk toward the 3rd car in the motorcade, the vehicle chosen to carry the heir apparent and his wife through the streets of Sarajevo. It is a girth and stiff double phaeton, a magnificent piece of Austrian engineering built in 1911. The bodywork is painted a deep, lustrous black, polished to a mirror shine that reflects the nervous faces of the crowd. The brass fittings, the headlights, the radiator grille, the door handles gleam like gold in the fierce morning sun. It is a machine designed to project power, wealth, and modernity. But as you stand next to it, breathing in the fumes of unburnt gasoline and leather polish, you realize it is essentially a velvet-lined death trap. The roof is folded down. This is the fatal design flaw of the day. Because the Archduke wants the people to see him, and because he wants to show he is not afraid, the canvas hood has been collapsed behind the rear seats. He and Sophie are completely exposed. They are sitting on a raised leather bench, essentially elevated targets. There is no bulletproof glass, which barely existed anyway, no high sides to duck behind. They are on display like prize dolls in a shop window. You watch as Ferdinand climbs in. He is awkward in his heavy uniform, the high collar restricting his movement. He has to arrange his sword so he can sit. Sophie climbs in beside him, her white silk dress rustling. She smiles at the crowd, waving a small fan to combat the heat. Across from them, on the jump seats, sit General Podgoric, the governor of Bosnia, and the owner of the car, Count Horak. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. This specific car, with the license plate III-I-118, has become one of the most haunted objects in history. After the assassination, a legend grew that the car was cursed. The story goes that over the next 12 years, it was owned by 15 different people, causing 13 deaths and various accidents. Owners allegedly went insane, died in crashes, or were crushed by the vehicle. While most of these stories were invented by tabloid journalists in the 1920s to sell papers, the car itself sits today in the Museum of Military History in Vienna, still bearing the bullet hole, a silent witness to the curse of bad luck, if not supernatural evil. The driver, Leopold Loika, adjusts his goggles. He is a professional, steady, and experienced, but he is driving in a city he doesn't know well, relying on the car ahead to lead the way. He engages the gear. The transmission grinds slightly. Cars in 1914 were not smooth operators, and the convoy lurches forward. You trot alongside the procession as it leaves the station area and turns onto the Apel Quay. The quay is the main boulevard of Sarajevo, running parallel to the Miljaska River. On one side, you have the shallow, murky river, bordered by a low retaining wall. On the other side, a row of handsome Austro-Hungarian buildings painted in pastel yellows and ochres. The sun is blinding now. The road is dusty. The crowd is dense. But unlike the station, where there was a mix of officials and travelers, the crowd here is chaotic. You see Bosnian peasants in fez hats, Austrian officers with monocles, veiled Muslim women, and Serbian merchants. It's a melting pot of the empire's subjects, and not all of them are happy to be in the pot. You notice something alarming about the security arrangement. The cars are driving slowly, painfully slowly, maybe 15 or 20 miles per hour. This is to allow the people to cheer and wave. But for an assassin, a target moving at the speed of a bicycle is hardly a moving target at all. Count Harrick, sitting next to the driver, seems to sense the danger. He does something unusual. He shifts his position, trying to stand on the running board or lean out to shield the Archduke with his own body on the riverside. It's a noble gesture, but he's protecting the wrong side. The threat isn't coming from the river. It's coming from the crowd on the sidewalk. A quirky fringe tidbit about the Archduke's outfit that adds a layer of grim irony. Ferdinand was a vain man. He was notoriously self-conscious about his waistline and wanted to look impeccable in his uniform. On this day, it is rumored that he had actually been sewn into his tunic to ensure there were no wrinkles and to create a slimmer silhouette. If he were to be wounded, this vanity would turn fatal. Doctors wouldn't be able to unbutton his coat quickly to access the wound. He essentially wrapped himself in a straitjacket of blue wool. The roar of the crowd rises and falls. Vivio! Vivio! But under the cheers, you can feel the hatred. Sarajevo in 1914 was a hotbed of radical student movements. The schools were closed for the holiday, meaning the streets were full of teenagers with nothing to do and heads full of revolutionary poetry. You scan the faces along the Apel Quay. You are looking for the assassins. They are there, blending in. 6 of them. They are spaced out along the route like landmines. They are armed with Serbian-made hand grenades, which look like small flasks of milk, and Browning FN model 1910 pistols. You spot the first one, Muhammad Mehmed Bazik. He is standing by the Jumarija Bridge. He looks terrified. As the car approaches, he puts his hand in his pocket, gripping his bomb. You hold your breath. The car passes him. Nothing happens. He freezes. He later claimed a policeman was standing too close, but in reality, he just lost his nerve. The velvet-lined death trap rolls past him, the Archduke's feathers bobbing mockingly. The motorcade continues. 1 assassin down, 5 to go. The tension is ratcheting up. The air feels heavy, like a thunderstorm is about to break, but the sky remains perfectly, cruelly blue. You run ahead, pushing through the sweating bodies. You need to get to the next bridge, the Kubralavio Bridge. That's where the next boy is waiting, and this one has a bomb too. The Gurf and Stift rumbles on, its tires crunching on the gravel, carrying the Empire toward the abyss. The driver honks the horn, a comical, quacking sound to clear a path. It's the sound of a Sunday drive, completely out of place in a tragedy. You leave the frozen assassin at the first bridge and move deeper into the crowd, shadowing the motorcade's path along the Meljaska River. The Apelki is packed now, a heaving mass of humanity sweating in the late morning sun. But you aren't looking at the cheering families or the bored policemen. You are looking for the ghosts in the machine. You are looking for the young Bosnians. Scattered along this embankment are 5 more young men. And when I say young, I mean barely out of puberty. They are teenagers, high school students, dropouts. They stand out to you not because they look dangerous, but because they look fragile. You spot Nedeljko Vabrinove near a lamp post. He is tall, gaunt, and looks like he hasn't slept in a week. He's wearing a long black coat that is completely inappropriate for the weather, likely because it's the only coat he owns. He is smiling a strange, manic smile. Then, further down, you see the ringleader, Gavrilo Princip. He is short, slight, with burning dark eyes and a thin, patchy mustache that betrays his 19 years. He looks less like a killer and more like a moody poet who just got rejected by a literary magazine. These boys are the assassins, and here is the brutal reality that defines them. They are already dead. Most of these conspirators, including Princip and Vabrinove, are suffering from tuberculosis. In 1914, consumption was a slow, agonizing death sentence. They are coughing into handkerchiefs that come away spotted with blood. They have fevers that have nothing to do with the sun. This is key to understanding why they are here. They aren't career criminals with retirement plans. They are terminal patients with nothing to lose. They want to burn out in a blaze of glory for the cause of Serbian nationalism rather than rot away in a hospital bed. You stand next to Vabrinove. He smells of stale tobacco and nervous sweat. He keeps patting his pocket. Inside, he has a bomb no bigger than a bar of soap, filled with nails and lead. It's a crude, terrifying little device. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. These boys didn't build the bombs themselves in a garage. They were supplied and trained by a shadowy organization within the Serbian military called the Black Hand Crnaruka. The head of Serbian military intelligence, Dragutin Dimitrijevic, code name Apis, orchestrated the whole thing. He gave them the weapons, the cyanide pills, and the training in a Belgrade park. It wasn't a grassroots student protest. It was a state-sponsored black op using disposable teenagers as the delivery system. The motorcade is getting closer. You can hear the low rumble of the Gurf and Stift's engine and the sporadic honking of its horn. The crowd surges forward, waving flags. The assassins are amateurs. You can see it in their body language. They are jittery. They are looking at each other, not the target. They have no exit strategy, no backup plan, and barely any communication. They are just standing there, hoping for a clear shot. It's the tactical equivalent of buying a lottery ticket. A quirky, fringe tidbit about their preparation. Before leaving Belgrade, the conspirators were so poor, they had to pawn their few possessions to survive. Princip actually pawned his winter coat to buy a few decent meals. Even on the morning of the assassination, they were worried about money. They were revolutionaries living on pocket change, eating cheap soup while planning to kill the heir to one of the wealthiest empires on earth. The contrast between the starving students and the Archduke in his gold-braided tunic couldn't be starker. As the cars approach the Kuberlovayo Bridge, you see Vabrinove tense up. He is the wild card of the group. He's known for being emotional and impulsive. He once got kicked out of school for celebrating the assassination of another official. Today, he wants to be the hero. He steps away from the lamppost. He pushes through a group of women. He asks a nearby policeman, "Which car is the Archduke in?" The policeman, in a moment of helpfulness that will haunt him forever, points to the third car. That one. Vadranov, I nods. He pulls the bomb from his pocket. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. How much did the Serbian government actually know? We know the Black Hand organized it, but did the Prime Minister, Nikola Pašic, know? Some historians argue he found out at the last minute and tried to send a vague warning to Vienna, but the message was so cryptic. Some young men might take a shot with blank cartridges that the Austrians ignored it. Others argue the Serbian government was complicit. It's the who ordered the hit mystery that effectively started the war. The car is 50 yards away. 40. 30. You watch Vabranovia. He is unscrewing the cap of the bomb. He has to strike the detonator against a hard object to activate the 10-second fuse. He looks around for something hard. He sees a lamppost. Click. The fuse is lit. It hisses quietly. The girth and stiff is right there. The green feathers of the Archduke's helmet are bobbing in the sunlight. Sophie is smiling. You want to scream. Don't do it. You want to tackle him. But you can't. You are just a ghost in the narrative. You can only watch as the consumptive teenager winds up his arm like a baseball pitcher. He steps into the street. The driver, Loika, sees him. The Archduke sees him. For a split second, everyone is frozen in a tableau of impending doom. The boy, the bomb, the royal couple, and the open car. He throws. The dark object arcs through the blue sky, tumbling end over end. It isn't a fast throw. It's a lob. It looks almost harmless, like someone tossing an apple, but it isn't an apple. It's the opening bell of World War I, and as it descends toward the open carriage, physics and fate are about to collide in the strangest possible way. The small, black object hangs in the air for what feels like an eternity. It is a moment of suspended animation. The crowd's cheers are still ringing. The engine is still chugging, and the green feathers on the Archduke's helmet are still bobbing. You watch the bomb descend, a lethal parabolic curve destined for the lap of the heir apparent. Gravity takes over. The bomb strikes, but it doesn't land in the Archduke's lap. It lands on the folded-down canvas roof at the back of the car, the very feature you identified earlier as a fatal flaw. Because the roof is a bundle of soft fabric and leather, the bomb doesn't detonate on impact. It bounces. At the same moment, the Archduke reacts. Whether by instinct, military training, or sheer luck, he sees the object. He raises his arm perhaps to shield Sophie, perhaps to swat the object away. His arm connects with the bomb just as it hits the folded roof. The bomb spins away. It tumbles over the back of the girth and stiff, falling onto the street behind the royal car. Accelerate. Someone screams, maybe Loika, maybe Podiorik. Loika slams his foot on the gas. The car lurches forward, speeding away from the danger zone. But the fourth car in the motorcade, a regular open touring car carrying the Archduke's aide, Count Waldeck, and the governor's aide, Colonel Maritzi, is following too closely. They drive right over the spot where the bomb landed. Boom. The explosion is deafening. It isn't a Hollywood fireball. It's a sharp, concussive crack that shatters the air pressure in your chest. A cloud of white smoke and dust erupts from beneath the fourth car. The force of the blast lifts the rear wheels off the ground. Shrapnel nails, lead, bits of pavement sprays into the crowd. The screaming starts instantly. It cuts through the ringing in your ears. You see people on the sidewalk clutching their legs. A woman collapses. The fourth car grinds to a halt, its rear axle destroyed, the tires shredded. Colonel Maritzi is slumped in the back seat, blood pouring from a wound in his neck. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. The bomb Vabranovia used had a 10 to minus 12 second time delay fuse. This was a standard military feature for hand grenades of that era, meant to be thrown from trenches, but for a moving assassination, it was a disaster. By the time the fuse burned down, the target car had already moved out of the kill zone. If he had used an impact detonator, World War I might have started right there at the bridge. The delay saved the Archduke, but doomed the men behind him. Up ahead, the Archduke's car has stopped. This is insane security protocol. You never stop in the kill zone, but Ferdinand is shouting at the driver. Stop, look back. What happened? He stands up in the car, completely exposed, looking back at the smoking wreck. Are they hurt? He demands. He is calm, eerily calm. He is checking on his men, while the dust of his own attempted murder is still settling. He sees Moretzi being helped out of the car. Satisfied that the threat is over, a fatal assumption, he orders Loika to drive on to the town hall. Meanwhile, back at the bridge, the scene has turned into a slapstick comedy of violence. Fabernovia, having thrown the bomb, now moves to step 2 of the plan, suicide. He pulls a small packet of cyanide powder from his pocket and swallows it. Then, for good measure, he jumps over the stone retaining wall into the Miljaska River to drown himself. You rush to the wall and look down. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit that highlights the amateur hour nature of the plot. It is the middle of a blazing hot summer. The Miljaska River is almost dry. It is practically a trickle of brown sludge. But Braunvier didn't plunge into a raging torrent. He fell 20 feet onto a bed of dry sand and 4 inches of water. He didn't drown. He just sprained his ankle. And the cyanide? It was old. It was likely expired or just bad quality. Instead of killing him instantly, it just burns his throat and makes him violently vomit. So there he is, the assassin who started the war. He is sitting in a puddle of muddy water, clutching a twisted ankle, throwing up and looking up at a crowd of very angry Bosnians. The crowd doesn't wait for the police. They jump over the wall. A shopkeeper, a barber, and 2 policemen descend on the failed assassin. You watch from the bridge as they drag him out of the mud and start beating him with fists, feet, and even a sword. He is hauled away, bloody and vomiting, shouting, "I am a Serbian hero." It is a pathetic, chaotic end to the first act. But back in the third car, the mood is one of stunned disbelief. The Archduke and Sophie are brushing debris off their clothes. "I think that was a bomb," Ferdinand says, with the detached observation of a man discussing the weather. Sophie's neck was grazed by a tiny piece of the detonator cap, leaving a small red mark, but she insists she is fine. Historians still argue about the Archduke's specific physical reaction to the bomb. Some eyewitness accounts say the bomb landed on his shoulder, and he picked it up and threw it. Others say hit the folded hood and bounced on its own. The deflection theory portrays Ferdinand as an action hero, while the bounce theory portrays him as just lucky. Given the speed of the event, it is likely a mix of both. He probably raised his arm, and the bomb deflected off his forearm. But in the myth-making of the Empire, he became the man who caught a grenade. The motorcade minus 1 car speeds up again. The rest of the assassins are still waiting down the line. You run along the quay, trying to keep up. You pass the other conspirators. Vaso Kuberlovio, the youngest, only 17, sees the explosion, sees the first assassin getting beaten, and panics. He doesn't pull his gun. He freezes. Popovic, the next one, also loses his nerve. He later said he didn't throw his bomb because Sophie was sitting next to him, and he couldn't kill a woman. The plan has collapsed. The bomb failed. The police are swarming. The Archduke is speeding toward the town hall, alive and furious. As you catch your breath, watching the dust settle over the Appel Quay, you realize something terrifying. The assassination attempt is effectively over. It failed. By all logic, everyone should go home. The police should arrest the ringleaders, and history should continue on its boring, peaceful trajectory. But fate in a certain sandwich has a different ending in mind. The Archduke isn't retreating to a bunker. He is going to the reception. He is going to make a speech. He is going to pretend everything is normal. And that decision to keep up appearances is going to lead him right back into the crosshairs. You sprint the final stretch along the Apple Quay, your lungs burning in the dusty heat, arriving just in time to see the motorcade pull up to the Sarajevo Town Hall. The building itself is a stunning piece of pseudo-Moorish architecture, striped in bands of orange and yellow stone, looking like a grand confection dropped into the Balkans. It was meant to symbolize the benevolent, multicultural rule of Austria-Hungary. Right now, it looks like a stage set for a farce. The Gurf and Stift screeches to a halt. The dust from the road and from the earlier explosions swirls around the tires. The doors open, and Archduke Franz Ferdinand steps out. If he looked heavy and imposing at the station, he now looks like a human volcano on the verge of eruption. His face is a deep, alarming shade of purple. His blue tunic is covered in a fine layer of gray dust from the bomb blast. He brushes at his sleeve aggressively, sending a cloud of grit into the air. He isn't scared. He is absolutely livid. He stomps up the red-carpeted stairs, his spurs clinking violently on the stone. Sophie follows him, looking pale and shaken, clutching her fan as if it were a weapon. The local dignitaries are waiting at the top of the stairs, smiling their frozen diplomatic smiles, seemingly unaware that they nearly just witnessed a regicide. The mayor of Sarajevo, Fehim Kirchik, steps forward. He is wearing a fez and a mayoral chain. He looks nervous, but not because of the bomb. He's nervous because he has to give a speech to the Archduke. He clears his throat, unfolds a piece of parchment, and begins to read. "Your Royal and Imperial Highness," the mayor intones, his voice trembling slightly. "Our hearts are filled with happiness over the most gracious visit with which your Highness has deigned to honor our capital city. It is the most tone-deaf moment in diplomatic history." The mayor is reading the pre-written script. He is talking about the enthusiasm and love of the people of Sarajevo, mere minutes after one of those loving people tried to blow the Archduke into the Miljaska River. Ferdinand cannot take it. He snaps. "Mr. Mayor!" He shouts, his voice echoing off the marble walls of the entrance hall. He interrupts the speech mid-sentence. "I come here as your guest, and you greet me with bombs. It is outrageous." The silence that follows is deafening. The crowd of officials freezes. The mayor looks like he wants the floor to swallow him whole. You can feel the tension in the air. It is sharp and brittle. This is the moment where the script usually breaks, where the dignitary storms off and the event is cancelled. But then you see Sophie. She steps closer to her husband. She places a gloved hand gently on his arm and whispers something into his ear. You can't hear the words, but you see the effect. Ferdinand's shoulders drop an inch. The purple fades slightly from his cheeks. He takes a deep, ragged breath. He is a man known for his explosive temper, but he is also a man who adores his wife. For her, he pulls it together. He turns back to the mayor. "You may speak," he growls. The mayor, sweating profusely, continues reading the speech about peace and love, as if nothing happened. It is surreal. You are witnessing a collision between the brutal reality of the 20th century, bombs, terrorism, and the rigid etiquette of the 19th century, speeches, protocol. The etiquette is winning, but only barely. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. After the mayor finally finished his agonizingly inappropriate speech, the Archduke had to respond. But his own prepared speech was in the car that had been damaged. An aide rushed up the stairs, carrying the papers. When Ferdinand unfolded them, they were splattered with the blood of Colonel Maritzi, the aide wounded in the blast. Ferdinand stood there, holding the blood-stained pages, and delivered a speech about peace and brotherhood. He even improvised a line, adding, "I see in you an expression of joy for the failure of the assassination attempt." It was a grim, dark joke that nobody laughed at. The ceremony moves inside the town hall. It is cool and shadowy in here, a welcome relief from the sun, but the atmosphere is funereal. The officials are whispering. The champagne is warm. Everyone is looking at the doors, expecting another bomb to roll in. You watch Ferdinand. He is pacing. He is worried about the injured men. We must visit them, he says to General Podiorak, the governor. We must go to the hospital. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Why didn't General Podiorak cancel the rest of the day immediately? He was the man responsible for the Archduke's safety. He had just seen a grenade thrown at his guest. Yet in the town hall, when asked if there would be more attacks, Podiorak famously replied, "Do you think Sarajevo is filled with assassins?" Historians argue whether this was colossal arrogance, stupidity, or a subconscious death wish. Some suggest Podiorak was so humiliated by the security failure that he wanted to pretend it hadn't happened to save his career. By downplaying the threat, he signed the Archduke's death warrant. The reception drags on for about 30 minutes. It feels like hours. You wander the perimeter of the room. You see the Archduke joking with a few local officers, trying to lighten the mood. "I bet you have a few more of those little pellets for me," he quips. He's trying to be the brave soldier, but you can see his eyes darting to the windows. A quirky, fringed tidbit about the town hall itself. The Vijećnica was built in a specific style to try and create a Bosnian identity that wasn't Ottoman or Serbian or Croatian, but a mix. It was a political building disguised as art, but the locals hated it. They called it the Parrot because of its bright, garish colors. So Ferdinand is essentially standing inside a giant, unpopular architectural experiment while debating whether to go back out into a city that wants to kill him. The decision is finally made. The original plan to visit the museum is scrapped. The Archduke insists on going to the garrison hospital to visit Colonel Maritzi. It is a noble, chivalrous gesture. He refuses to leave a wounded man behind. "I am going," he states. "Sophie, you should stay here." "It is too dangerous." Sophie shakes her head. "No," she says firmly. "I am not leaving you. I am going with you." It is the most romantic and tragic decision of her life. If she had stayed at the town hall, looking at the tapestries, she would have survived the day. But she climbs back into the velvet-lined death trap because she loves him. You follow them back out to the steps. The sun is now high in the sky, blazing hot. The crowd outside has thinned out slightly, but there are still people loitering. The Gurf and Stift is waiting. The engine is idling. General Podiorak decides to change the route. To avoid the narrow streets and the crowds, they will drive straight back down the Appel Quay at high speed. It's a sensible plan. Speed is safety. If they just drive fast along the wide river road, no assassin can hit them. There is just one problem. A tiny, bureaucratic, fatal problem. Nobody tells the driver. You watch as Leopold Leuke opens the door for the royal couple. He doesn't know the plan has changed. He thinks he is still following the original route to the museum. He thinks he is supposed to turn right at the Latin Bridge. You want to shout at Podiorak. Tell him, tell the driver. But the general is too busy arguing with his own staff. He climbs into the car. The door shuts. The motorcade pulls away from the town hall. You start running again. You know where they are going. You know where the mistake will happen. And you know who is waiting at the deli on the corner of the Latin Bridge, hungry and depressed. The final act is set. The tragedy moves from the grand stage of the town hall back to the gritty reality of the street. You are standing in the cool, echoing vestibule of the Sarajevo town hall, watching the most critical conversation of the 20th century unfold. It is a quiet, huddled conference between 3 men and 1 woman, surrounded by nervous functionaries who are terrified of making eye contact. The air is thick with the smell of stale cigar smoke and fear. Archduke Franz Ferdinand is pacing. He has regained his composure after his outburst at the mayor, but the adrenaline is still pumping through his veins. He is a man of rigid principles, and one of those principles is loyalty to his men. He cannot simply go to the museum and look at carpets while Colonel Maritzi is lying in a hospital bed with a hole in his neck. It would be dishonorable. We go to the garrison hospital. Ferdinand announces, his voice echoing slightly off the marble. I wish to see Maritzi. General Potiorek, the governor, nods. He is desperate to salvage the situation. He knows that if the Archduke leaves Sarajevo now, angry and unheard, his career is over. He needs to show that he is in control. A wise decision, Your Highness, Potiorek says, smoothing his mustache. But we must alter the security arrangements. This brings us to the pivotal change of plans. The original itinerary was to drive from the town hall, turn right onto Franz Joseph Street, and head into the narrow, bustling market district to visit the museum. Potiorek knows that the narrow streets are a sniper's paradise. They are crowded, shadowed, and impossible to secure. We will avoid the city center, Potiorek decides. We will drive straight back down the Appel Quay. It is wide, open, and we can maintain high speed. No assassin can hit a car moving at 40 miles per hour. It is a sound tactical plan. If they just blast down the river road, they will be safe. It is the kind of logical military thinking that should have worked. But then Sophie speaks. Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, has been standing quietly by her husband's side. She is usually the model of the submissive, supportive wife, always walking 2 steps behind him in Vienna. But today is different. Today, she has seen death fly past her face. She looks at Ferdinand. I am not going to the governor's palace, she says softly, but with a steel core that surprises everyone. I am going with you to the hospital. Ferdinand looks at her. Sophie, it is dangerous. You should stay here. No, she insists. I will not let you go alone. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. Sophia's presence in the car was an anomaly. Under the strict rules of the Habsburg court, she was not of equal rank to the Archduke. In Vienna, she was not allowed to ride in the same carriage as him during official state functions. But in Sarajevo, far from the prying eyes of the emperor, the rules were relaxed. This was one of the few times they could ride side by side in public as a married couple. Her refusal to leave him wasn't just bravery. It was an act of marital solidarity that she was rarely allowed to perform. If she had followed protocol, she would have been in a separate car or staying behind, and the assassin's bullet meant for her would have hit empty air. The decision is made. The royal couple will go to the hospital. The route will be changed to the Appel Quay. The convoy will drive fast. Potiorek turns to his chief of police. Clear the quay, he orders. And tell the drivers. And here's where history fractures. You watch as the orders are passed down the line. It's a game of telephone played by terrified bureaucrats. Potiorek tells his aide. The aide tells the police chief. The police chief goes to clear the crowd. But in the chaos, the confusion, and the sheer noise of the moment, one crucial link in the chain breaks. Nobody tells the drivers. Specifically, nobody tells Leopold Loika, the driver of the Archduke's car. Loika is a Czech, a professional, but he is not a mind reader. He is sitting in the Gurf and stiffed outside, wiping the dust from the dashboard, assuming the plan is still the plan. He thinks he is driving to the museum. He thinks he is supposed to turn right at the Latin Bridge. You want to intervene. You want to tap Loika on the shoulder and say, "Hey, buddy, go straight." But you are paralyzed by the constraints of time travel. You can only watch the incompetence unfold in slow motion. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Was this communication failure purely accidental? Or was there a language barrier at play? The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a polyglot mess. The officers spoke German, the locals spoke Bosnian Serbo-Croatian, and the drivers were often Czech or Hungarian. Some historians suggest that the frantic orders shouted in German might not have been fully understood or relayed to the Czech driver in the heat of the moment. It suggests that the empire didn't fall because of nationalism, but because they literally couldn't talk to each other. The party moves back outside. The sun is now at its zenith, blazing directly overhead. The shadows have vanished. The Appel Quay is a ribbon of white dust. Ferdinand and Sophie climb back into the open car. They look composed, but you can see the tension in their jaws. They are getting back into the bullseye. Count Harek, the car's owner, decides to take a more active role this time. He stands on the left running board, shielding the Archduke from the riverside. "I will protect His Highness," Harek says. It is a valiant, chivalrous gesture. But again, it is tragically flawed. By standing on the left, he is shielding Ferdinand from the river, where Vabernovier threw his bomb. But he is leaving the right side, the sidewalk side, completely exposed. And that is exactly where the next threat is waiting. A quirky fringe tidbit about the atmosphere in the car. General Podiorik, sitting opposite the Archduke, was reportedly seething with anger, not at the assassins, but at the police. He felt humiliated. He spent the few minutes before departure berating the chief of police, Dr. Gerd, shouting, "What is this? This is insane. You have not secured the streets." He was so focused on blaming his subordinates that he forgot to assure the most basic operational detail, the route. His rage blinded him to the logistics. The engines roar to life. The mayor, who is going in the first car, pulls away. He doesn't know the plan has changed either. He turns right. The second car follows the mayor. It turns right. Loika, in the third car, watches them. He does what any good convoy driver does. He follows the leader. He puts the Gurf and Stift into gear. He eases off the clutch. The car rolls forward. You run alongside them one last time. You know where they are going. They are heading for the Latin Bridge. They are heading for the turn that shouldn't happen. And waiting there, just a few hundred yards away, is Gavrilo Princip. He isn't at the bridge yet. He's wandering. He's failed. He thinks the plot is over. He is hungry. He is heading to Moritz Schiller's Delicatessen to get something to eat. The tragedy is now moving on two convergent tracks. On one track, a confused driver is leading a royal couple into a trap. On the other track, a depressed teenager is buying a sandwich. The universe is aligning the tumblers of a lock that will open the door to hell. You are now jogging alongside the motorcade as it picks up speed, leaving the town hall behind. The air is thick with the smell of exhaust and the heavy, humid heat of midday. The convoy is moving, but it's moving with a strange, disjointed energy. The police car in front is accelerating, eager to get this nightmare over with. The mayor's car follows. Then comes the Gurf and Stift, carrying the Archduke, Sophie, and General Podiorik. You watch General Podiorik in the back seat. He is a man consumed by frustration. He is barking orders at the chief of police, Dr. Gerd, who is standing on the running board of the car ahead, or shouting from the sidewalk. Accounts vary, but the confusion is absolute. Podiorik is so focused on yelling about the security failure that he forgets the one thing that matters right now, the steering wheel. He assumes the driver knows. He assumes the aide told the chauffeur. He assumes that in the highly disciplined Austro-Hungarian army, information travels by osmosis. But Leopold Loika, the man gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity, knows nothing. He is staring at the back of the mayor's car. His orders are simple. Follow the leader. Don't get lost. The convoy accelerates down the Appel Quay. This is the safe zone. The river is on the left, the buildings on the right. If they keep going straight, they will blast past the city center at 40 miles per hour, leaving any remaining assassins in the dust. You can see the road stretching out ahead wide, open, and liberating. But up ahead, the lead car, the one carrying the chief of police and the mayor, slows down. They are approaching the Latin Bridge. This is the intersection with Franz Joseph Street. This was the original turn-off point for the museum. The lead car puts on its indicator, or signals with a hand. It begins to turn right. You want to scream. No, go straight. But the lead car turns. The mayor's car follows. Loika sees them turn. He thinks, okay, We're sticking to the original plan. He slows the heavy girth and stiff down. He cranks the steering wheel to the right. The car leaves the safety of the wide Appel Quay and turns onto the narrow, crowded Franz Joseph Street. General Podiorik looks up. He realizes what is happening. He sees the buildings closing in. He sees the crowd pressing against the car. He realizes they are driving directly into the trap he just tried to avoid. "What is this?" Podiorik screams. "Stop! You're going the wrong way. We ought to go straight." It is the most expensive sentence in human history. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. This specific wrong turn is often cited as the singular cause of the war, but it highlights a massive structural failure in the Austro-Hungarian administration. The fact that the governor of Bosnia could ineffectively communicate a simple route change to his own driver in his own capital city is a microcosm of the empire itself. It was a bureaucracy so strangled by protocol and hierarchy that common sense suffocated. There were too many middlemen between the general and the steering wheel. Loika reacts to the shout. He is a good soldier. When a general screams, "Stop," you stop. He slams on the brakes. The girth and stift shudders to a halt. But they aren't just anywhere. They haven't stopped in a safe, open park. They have stopped 5 feet from the curb on a narrow street corner. Loika tries to put the car in reverse to back out onto the quay. But the gearbox of a 1911 girth and stift is not a smooth synchromesh mechanism like a modern Honda. It is a clunky, heavy box of metal gears. You have to double clutch. You have to wrestle it. Grind. Clunk. The car stalls. The engine dies. The silence is sudden and terrifying. The crowd on the sidewalk stares at the stalled car. The Archduke sits there, a sitting duck in a stopped vehicle, his green feathers perfectly still. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Did the crowd cheer or jeer? Some accounts say the people on the corner started clapping, thinking the car stopped so the Archduke could wave at them. Others say there was a stunned silence. But for one person in the crowd, it wasn't a cheer or a jeer. It was a miracle. You look to your right. Standing outside Schiller's Delicatessen, just a few feet away from the stalled car, is a young man. He looks dazed. He looks like he's given up on life. It is Gavrilo Princip. He isn't hiding in a sniper nest. He isn't poised for action. He is literally just standing there, possibly having just eaten or about to eat his lunch. He looks at the car. He looks at the Archduke. He blinks. A quirky, fringe tidbit about this moment. The sheer statistical improbability of this meeting is staggering. Princip had moved to this specific corner after the first attempt failed, likely, because he thought the Archduke might pass by on his way back, but he assumed the car would be moving fast. He never in his wildest dreams expected the target to park directly in front of him. It's like a deer hunter giving up, going to a diner for coffee, and having the prize buck walk through the front door and stand by the jukebox. Princip freezes for a second. He can't believe his luck. The universe has delivered the heir apparent on a silver platter. You watch Podiorik yelling at the driver, "Reverse, reverse." Loika is frantically trying to restart the engine. He's fumbling with the controls. The car rocks slightly, but it doesn't catch. Princip's hand moves to his pocket. He isn't reaching for a bomb this time. The crowd is too close. A bomb would kill too many bystanders, and probably himself. He is reaching for the Browning FN Model 1910 pistol. He steps forward. He doesn't run. He just takes one step off the curb, onto the running board of the car. He is so close he could reach out and touch Sophie's silk dress. The sandwich, if he had one, is forgotten. The failure of the morning is forgotten. The tuberculosis is forgotten. There is only the car, the man in the blue tunic, and the gun. You stand frozen on the corner, watching the gears of history grind against each other. The driver is fighting the clutch. The general is shouting. The Archduke is looking annoyed, and the boy is raising his arm. You are standing on the corner of the Latin Bridge and Franz Joseph Street, a spot that feels deceptively quiet compared to the chaos down by the river. The air here is still, trapped between the high buildings, smelling of roasting coffee and dust. Standing next to you, leaning against the stucco wall of a corner shop, is the most dangerous man in the world. But right now, Gavrilo Princip doesn't look dangerous. He looks pathetic. He is 19 years old, undersized, and vibrating with a mix of adrenaline and crushing disappointment. He just watched his friend Fabrino Villa fail. He heard the explosion, saw the motorcade speed away, and assumed, like everyone else, that the plot was a bust. The Archduke is alive. The police are swarming. The revolution is over before it began. Princip is crushed. He doesn't know what to do. Should he go home? Should he try to find the others? Should he shoot himself now and save the police the trouble? He wanders over to this corner, purely by chance. He stops in front of a shop with a sign that reads Moritz Schiller's Delicatessen. This brings us to the central object of our story, the sandwich. According to the legend that has proliferated across the internet, textbooks, and trivia nights for the last century, Princip stopped here to buy a sandwich. He was hungry. It makes for a compelling cinematic detail, the banality of lunch colliding with the enormity of fate. You can picture it. A sullen teenager holding a cheese sandwich mid-bite when history literally drives up to his table. Here is the open scholarly debate. Did the sandwich actually exist? Most serious historians roll their eyes at this detail. There is no record in the police interrogation files of Princip eating lunch. There is no receipt for a sandwich. In 1914 Sarajevo, sandwiches as a grab-and-go convenience food weren't really a thing. You sat down for a meal. You didn't grab a sub. It is highly likely that Princip was just standing there, or perhaps he went inside to buy a glass of wine to calm his nerves. The sandwich detail seems to have been added much later, possibly originating in a 2003 documentary or novel that fictionalized the event. But the myth has become stronger than the truth. It serves a narrative purpose. It emphasizes the randomness of the event. So, let's split the difference. You watch Princip. He stands by the window of Schiller's. Maybe he buys a roll. Maybe he just stares at the pastries, his stomach churning with hunger and nausea. He is a boy who pawned his coat for food, so the hunger is real, even if the sandwich is a metaphor. He turns his back to the street. He is looking at his reflection in the glass. He sees a failure. He sees a sick boy with tuberculosis who promised his friends he would change the world, and instead, he is just loitering on a street corner while the Archduke gives speeches. He touches the heavy weight in his pocket. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. The weapon in Princip's pocket was a Browning FN Model 1910. It is a semi-automatic pistol, serial number 19074. It was chosen specifically by the Black Hand because it was small, easy to conceal, and reliable. It fired a 380, a CP round deadly at close range, but not a hand cannon. It was a weapon designed for self-defense, easily hidden in a coat pocket or a sandwich wrapper. The irony is that this mass-produced piece of Belgian engineering, sold to thousands of civilians, would become the catalyst for the industrial slaughter of millions. Princip sighs. He kicks at a loose cobblestone. He is waiting for the crowds to disperse, so he can slip away into the anonymity of the city. He is thinking about his parents in the countryside. He is thinking about the poetry of Walt Whitman, which he loved. He is thinking about anything other than killing. A quirky, fringe tidbit about the location. Moritz Schiller's shop wasn't just a deli. It was a wine shop and Feinkust, fine foods. Schiller himself was Jewish. In a grim twist of historical irony, the shop where the First World War began would later be confiscated and destroyed during the Second World War when the Nazis, including Austrian soldiers, invaded Yugoslavia. The corner is a nexus point for the tragedies of the 20th century. The noise of the crowd shifts. Princip looks up. He hears cheering. He hears the honking of a car horn, that distinct, quacking sound of the girth and stift. He frowns. Why would the cars be coming back this way? The plan was for them to go to the museum. They should be miles away by now. He steps away from the window. He looks down Franz Joseph Street. He sees the mayor's car turn the corner. Then the second car. His heart stops. He recognizes the uniforms. He recognizes the feathers. He isn't eating a sandwich. He isn't drinking wine. He is staring in disbelief. The target has returned. The target is driving right at him. You can see the switch flip in his brain. The despair vanishes, replaced by a cold, robotic clarity. He doesn't have to hunt. He doesn't have to run. He just has to wait. He takes a step forward. He positions himself on the corner, right where the pavement narrows. He knows that to make the turn, the car will have to slow down. He doesn't know that Podiorik is shouting. He doesn't know the driver is confused. He just knows that God, or fate, or the devil, has given him a second chance. And he knows he won't get a third. He unbuttons his coat. He grips the handle of the Browning. The checkered grip feels rough against his sweating palm. He disengages the safety. The girth and stift is approaching the intersection. It slows down. It begins to turn. You are standing right next to him. You want to grab his arm. You want to shout. Don't do it. You'll kill 20 million people. But the invisible wall of history holds you back. You can only witness the conversion of a sandwich-seeking dropout into the angel of death. The car turns. The gears grind. The engine stalls. Princip looks at the stalled car. He looks at the Archduke, who is sitting less than 2 meters away, looking frustrated, perhaps asking Podiorik for directions. Their eyes meet. Princip raises the gun. To understand how the barrel of that Browning pistol ended up leveled at the Archduke's chest, you have to tear your eyes away from the assassin for a split second and look at the car in front of the Archduke. You have to watch the domino that fell first. Just seconds ago, the lead car of the motorcade, carrying the mayor of Sarajevo and the chief of police, Dr. Edmund Gerd, approached the Latin Bridge. This is the moment where history held its breath. The Appel Quay stretches out straight ahead wide, safe and open, a direct shot to the hospital and safety. To the right lies the narrow, crowded throat of Franz Joseph Street. You watch the mayor's driver. He is tense. He is following the original pre-bomb itinerary. He flicks the wheel to the right. The lead car swings away from the river. It commits to the turn. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact for this section. The layout of this intersection was particularly treacherous for a motorcade. The angle between the Appel Quay and Franz Joseph Street is a sharp 90 degrees. To make the turn, the cars had to slow down to a walking pace, almost a crawl. It was a maneuver that stripped the convoy of its one advantage, speed. By following the lead car into this tight, architectural choke point, the entire procession was forced to decelerate into a sniper's dream scenario. You look at Dr. Gerd in the passenger seat of that first car. He is the man who knows the new plan. He is the man who should be screaming, "Straight! Go straight!" But he sits there, perhaps paralyzed by the stress of the morning, perhaps assuming the driver knows something he doesn't. He remains silent. The car completes the turn and accelerates up the narrow street, oblivious to the fact that they are leading the heir to the throne into a dead end. The second car follows. It's a mindless, mechanical procession. If the first sheep jumps off the cliff, the second sheep jumps too. And then, Leopold Loika in the girth and stift. You can see the hesitation in his hands. He sees the open key ahead. He sees the cars turning right. In the split-second calculus of a chauffeur, instinct wins over logic. He follows the leader. He cranks the heavy steering wheel of the double phaeton, hauling the massive black beast of a car around the corner. A car leaves the sun-drenched safety of the embankment and plunges into the shadows of the side street. Here is an open scholarly debate. Did the chief of police, Dr. Sherd, actually shout a warning that was drowned out by the crowd? Some apologetic historians for the Empire later claimed that Sherd waved his hands or shouted, but the noise of the cheering, or jeering, crowd masked the order. Others argue that Sherd was simply incompetent, a bureaucrat out of his depth who froze when it mattered most. Standing here on the corner, watching the dust swirl around the tires, the silence from the front seat of the lead car is deafening. The crowd here is different. On the quay, they were a blur. Here, on Franz Joseph Street, they are a wall. The buildings loom over the street Schiller's Deli, on one side, a bank on the other. The acoustic environment changes instantly. The sound of the engine bounces off the walls. The cheers sound aggressive, claustrophobic. A quirky, fringe tidbit about the street itself. Franz Joseph Street was, ironically, named after the Archduke's uncle, the Emperor Franz Joseph. The Archduke had a terrible relationship with his uncle. The Emperor often complained about Ferdinand's modern ideas and his marriage to Sophie. There is a grim poetic justice in the fact that Ferdinand is being driven to his death down a street named after the man who seemingly hated him. It's as if the Empire itself is rejecting him. You watch the Gerf and Stift straighten out after the turn. Loika presses the gas, intending to catch up to the mayor. But then, the voice from the back seat cuts through the noise. General Podiorik has finally processed the visual data. He realizes they aren't by the river anymore. He realizes they are in the bazaar. "Halt!" Podiorik screams, his face flushing red. "Wrong way. We must go back." It is the command that breaks the rhythm. Loika, a disciplined man, reacts instantly. He doesn't question. He doesn't look for a safe place to pull over. He slams on the brakes right in the middle of the road. The momentum of the heavy car lurches forward, compressing the suspension, and then rocks back. The tires bite into the gravel. The vehicle comes to a dead stop. The lead cars, the mayor, and the chief of police are already disappearing up the street. They don't see the Archduke stop. They keep driving, leaving their VIP behind. The security bubble has officially burst. The Gerf and Stift is now an island, stranded in a sea of confused onlookers, separated from its escort. You look at the position of the car. It hasn't just stopped. It has presented itself. It is angled slightly toward the curb, effectively closing the distance between the passenger seat and the sidewalk. It is a perfect stationary target. The wrong turn is complete. The trap is set. The driver has followed the wrong car. The general has shouted the wrong order, and the vehicle has stopped in the wrong place. And now, as the dust settles, the only thing moving is the hand of the boy on the corner. The Gerf and Stift double phaeton does not simply stop. It surrenders. You are standing close enough to hear the specific mechanical death rattle of the engine. Leopold Loika, responding to General Podiorik's scream of halt, has slammed his foot onto the brake pedal while simultaneously trying to declutch. In a modern car, this would just be a sudden stop. But this is a 1911 beast of burden. The sudden deceleration, combined with the driver's frantic attempt to shift into reverse while the wheels are still turning, is too much for the transmission. G-R-R-R-R clunk. The gears mesh violently, grinding metal on metal. The engine shudders a violent physical convulsion that shakes the green feathers on the Archduke's helmet and then dies. The silence that follows is instant and heavy. The chugging roar of the 32-horsepower engine is replaced by the hissing of the radiator and the confused murmur of the crowd. The car is now a 2-ton paperweight sitting in the middle of Franz Joseph Street. Loika is panicked. You can see the sweat instantly bead on his forehead. He grabs the gear lever, which is mounted outside the body of the car on the right side. He wrestles with it, trying to find neutral, trying to find reverse. But the gearbox is jammed or stiff. He is hauling on the lever, his white-gloved hand slipping on the metal. Reverse. Go back to the key. Podiorik is still shouting. pointing back the way they came, oblivious to the fact that shouting at a combustion engine rarely makes it work faster. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. The Gurf and Stift was a luxury vehicle, the Rolls-Royce of the East, but it lacked an electric starter. If the engine stalled, you couldn't just turn a key to restart it. You usually had to get out and hand crank the engine from the front. However, some models had a flywheel mechanism or a complex ignition sequence that might allow a restart if the engine was still hot, but it required finesse. Loika, under extreme duress, has lost all finesse. He is mashing pedals and grinding gears, turning a momentary stall into a prolonged tactical disaster. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand sits in the back, motionless. He doesn't look scared. He looks annoyed. This is the ultimate indignity. He has survived a bombing, a screaming match with the mayor, and a high-speed chase, only to be defeated by a clutch pedal. He leans forward, perhaps to ask what is wrong, perhaps to scold the driver. Sophie is sitting to his right. She is closest to the sidewalk. She looks at the crowd, perhaps noticing the strange stillness of the young man standing just a few feet away. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Why didn't the bodyguard react? Count Herrick is standing on the left running board, protecting the Archduke from the riverside, where the first bomb came from. But the car has stopped with the right side exposed to the crowded sidewalk. Historians argue whether Herrick should have jumped over the car or run around to the other side. Some argue he was pinned in place by the sudden stop. Others suggest the fog of war paralyzed him. He stayed on the left, shielding the Archduke from the empty air of the street, while the real threat walked up on the right. You look at Gavrilo Princip. He is no longer the dejected teenager staring at a sandwich. He has stepped off the curb. He is not running. He is not screaming, death to tyrants. He is moving with the eerie calm of a sleepwalker. He steps onto the asphalt. He is so close to the car that he can smell the perfume of the Duchess and the exhaust of the stalled engine. The distance is the most shocking part of this tableau. He is not a sniper in a tower. He is not a bomber throwing from a bridge. He is essentially standing in the car's blind spot, less than 5 feet from the Archduke. It is point-blank range. It is intimate. A quirky, fringe tidbit about the gun. The Browning FN Model 1910 has a grip safety. This means you have to squeeze the handle firmly to disengage the internal lock before the trigger will work. Princip, in his adrenaline-fueled state, might have fumbled this. There are apocryphal stories that he almost dropped the gun, or that his hand was shaking so badly he had to use 2 hands. But as he steps forward, his grip tightens. The safety clicks off. The weapon is live. Loika gives up on the gear stick for a moment and reaches for the ignition controls. He is trying to restart the car. The starter motor whines a high-pitched, desperate sound. Whir, whir. The engine coughs, but doesn't catch. The crowd on the sidewalk is pressing in. They are curious. Is that the Archduke? Why have they stopped? They are unintentional accomplices, their bodies forming a wall that prevents the car from easily maneuvering and prevents the police from seeing the gun. Princip raises his arm. He doesn't aim like a marksman. He doesn't extend his arm fully. He keeps his elbow bent, firing from the hip or chest level. He is firing blindly into the mass of blue uniform and white silk. You are standing right there, frozen in the amber of history. You see the black bore of the pistol. You see the Archduke's eyes widen, not in fear, but in recognition. He sees the gun. He sees the boy. The world seems to contract down to this single cubic meter of space. The stalled engine, the shouting general, the frozen bodyguard, the annoyed Archduke, and the boy with the trembling hand. The gears of the car have stopped, but the gears of fate have clicked into their final fatal alignment. The stall has bought Princip the one thing he needed, a stationary target. He squeezes the trigger. The sound of the end of the world is surprisingly small. It isn't the chest-thumping boom of the grenade we heard earlier. It is a sharp, Dry crack crack, like a dry branch snapping or a car backfiring. Gavrilo Princip fires 2 shots. The distance is so short, maybe 5 feet, that he practically cannot miss. The first bullet strikes Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the neck. The second bullet, fired as Princip is being jostled or as his hand recoils, strikes Sophie in the abdomen. Time seems to suspend in the immediate aftermath. For a few agonizing seconds, nobody realizes what has happened. The Archduke remains sitting upright. He doesn't scream. He doesn't flail. The green feathers on his helmet are still. Sophie is still sitting next to him, her face pale but composed. General Podiorik, sitting opposite them, actually thinks the assassin has missed. He sees no blood. He hears no cry of pain. He assumes the pop-pop sound was just another failed attempt, perhaps blank cartridges or a warning shot. He turns to the driver, Loika, who has finally managed to engage the reverse gear. "Drive," Podiorik shouts, "to the hospital." But the damage is done. The physics of the bullets are already working their dark magic inside the bodies of the royal couple. The first bullet, a .380 caliber round, passed through the side of the car, or went over the door, accounts vary, and hit Ferdinand in the jugular vein. It is a fatal wound, but because he is wearing that tightly buttoned, high-collared tunic we discussed earlier, the blood is trapped. He is bleeding internally, the pressure building up inside his throat, but to the outside observer, he looks fine. The second bullet passed through the side of the car and the leather upholstery before striking Sophie. It severed her gastric artery. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. Gavrilo Princip later testified in court that he never intended to kill Sophie. He was aiming for General Podiorik, the governor, whom he blamed for the oppression of the Bosnian people. But in the chaos of the moment, the recoil of the small pistol, the jostling of the crowd, the adrenaline, his aim drifted. He killed the mother of 3 children by accident. It adds a layer of Grecian tragedy to the event. The one person who wasn't supposed to be there, who only came out of love, was the one who took the bullet meant for the military commander. The realization of the horror happens in slow motion. As the car finally lurches into motion, accelerating away from the assassin, Sophie reacts first. She sees the blood beginning to spurt from her husband's mouth. "For God's sake, what has happened to you?" She cries out. Then she collapses. She slides off the seat and falls across Ferdinand's lap. General Podiorik thinks she has fainted from shock. He is still focused on getting them out of the kill zone, but Ferdinand knows. He knows she isn't fainting. He reaches out a hand to hold her, his own strength fading rapidly as his lifeblood pumps into his lungs. "Sophie, Sophie," he gasps, his voice wet and gurgling. "Don't die. Stay alive for our children." It is the final, desperate plea of a dying man. He isn't thinking about the empire, or the Serbs, or the war. He is thinking about his kids back in Austria, who are about to become orphans. Back on the corner, the scene has dissolved into violence. Princip tries to raise the gun to his own temple. He has a cyanide pill in his pocket, but a bullet is faster. He wants to finish the job, the suicide part of the pact. But he is too slow. A bystander, Antivelik, sees what is happening and jumps him. He grabs Princip's arm. The pistol falls, or is wrestled away. The crowd, realizing that this scrawny teenager has just shot the Archduke, descends on him like a pack of wolves. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Who actually stopped Princip? The official police report credits the officers who rushed in, but eyewitness accounts describe a much more brutal, chaotic scene where the local crowd, Muslims, Croats, and loyalist Serbs beat Princip nearly to death. They kicked him, punched him, and struck him with walking sticks. One account says a man was trying to stab him with a sword cane. The police had to rescue the assassin from the mob, not to arrest him, but to keep him alive long enough to be hanged. By the time they dragged him away, one of his arms was broken, and he was vomiting blood. A quirky, fringe tidbit about the arrest. During the scuffle, Princip swallowed his cyanide pill. But just like with Vabernoviae earlier, the poison was a dud. It was old, decomposed, or just bad chemistry. It burned his throat and made him sick, but it didn't kill him. So, instead of a quick, honorable death, he was left retching on the pavement while being kicked in the ribs by a dozen angry shopkeepers. The universe really didn't want these guys to have an easy exit. The Gurf and Stift is now speeding back along the Appel Quay, finally doing what it should have done 5 minutes ago. It is racing toward the governor's residence, the Konak, not the hospital, because Podiorek is now panicking and just wants to get inside a secure compound. In the back seat, the Archduke is slumped over. He is still conscious, but barely. Count Harek, holding him up by the collar, asks, "Is your Highness suffering?" Ferdinand, staring straight ahead with glazing eyes, replies, "It is nothing." He says it again. "It is nothing." He repeats it 6 or 7 times, his voice getting quieter with each repetition. "Eases nits. Eases nits." It is the mantra of a man trying to deny the reality of his own death. It is the final denial of the Habsburg monarchy, ignoring the fatal wound and pretending everything is fine until the moment the heart stops beating. You watch the car disappear into the dust. The corner of Franz Joseph Street is now a crime scene. The sandwich shop, if it was a sandwich shop, is now a landmark. The crowd is buzzing with confused energy. Is he dead? Did you see the blood? You look at the spot where the car stalled. There is no blood on the pavement. It's all in the car. There is just the smell of exhaust and the lingering echo of those 2 small shots. Princip is being hauled away, his face a mask of blood and bruises. He looks small. He looks like a child who has broken a window, not a man who has just broken the world. He doesn't know if he succeeded. He probably thinks he failed again. He won't know he killed them both until later that night in his cell. You stand there, feeling the heat of the sun. The first shot of the war has been fired. The countdown to Armageddon has begun. But right now, in this dusty Bosnian street, it just feels like a tragedy. A husband and wife are dying in a car seat, and a sick boy is being dragged to jail. The geopolitical nightmare hasn't started yet. For now, it is just personal. You follow the mob dragging the broken body of Gavrilo Princip away from the corner of Franz Joseph Street. It is a gruesome, chaotic procession. The crowd is baying for blood, kicking and spitting at the small figure in the center. If the police hadn't intervened, swinging their sabers flat side down to beat back the shopkeepers, the assassin would have been torn limb from limb right there on the pavement. They haul him into the nearest police post. It is a dark, stifling room that smells of unwashed bodies and fear. They throw him into a chair, or perhaps onto the floor. He is bleeding from a dozen cuts. His arm is fractured. His face is swollen. But the real agony isn't coming from the beatings. It is coming from his stomach. You watch as he doubles over, retching violently. The cyanide is doing its work, but not the work he intended. This brings us to the grim reality of the suicide mission. The young Bosnians had a pact. They were not supposed to be taken alive. They were supposed to kill the tyrant and then erase themselves from the earth, leaving no trail back to Belgrade. They all carried small packets of potassium cyanide powder, wrapped in paper, supplied by the Black Hand. It was supposed to be a quick, clean exit, a bite, a convulsion, and then darkness. But as you watch Princip gasping for air, clutching his burning throat, you realize the poison was a lie. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. Both Nedeljko Vabernovian, the bomber, and Gavrilo Princip took their cyanide, and both failed to die. The poison caused severe corrosion of the stomach lining and violent vomiting, but it was not lethal. This failure was catastrophic for the conspirators, because it meant they could be interrogated. If they had died, the link to the Serbian military intelligence might have remained a theory. Because they lived, the Austrians were able to extract the details of the plot, the names of their handlers, and the origin of the weapons. The failure of the poison directly paved the road to the ultimatum and the war. The police officers are shouting at him. "Who are you? Who sent you?" Princip looks up, his eyes watering, his lips burned by the acid. "I am a Serbian hero," he rasps, repeating the line Babernovia used earlier. "I am a Yugoslav nationalist, aiming for the unification of all Yugoslavs, and I do not care what form of state, but it must be freed from Austria." He is defiant, but he is also a 19-year-old boy who is in excruciating pain and terrifyingly alone. The adrenaline of the assassination is fading, replaced by the cold, hard walls of the cell. You look around the room. The police are frantic. They don't know yet if the Archduke is dead. He is currently bleeding out in the governor's residence, which we will get to. But they know this is the biggest security failure in the history of the province. They need answers fast. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Why did the cyanide fail? There are two main schools of thought. The first is simple incompetence. The Black Hand supplied them with old, expired poison that had lost its potency due to poor storage or age. The second theory is much darker. Some historians argue that Dragutin Dmitrijevic Apis, the head of the Black Hand, gave them weak poison intentionally. Why? Perhaps he wanted them to suffer. Or more likely, he didn't care if they talked, as long as the deed was done, and he didn't want to waste good poison on disposable assets. A third, even more cynical theory suggests the cyanide was just a harmless powder meant to give the boys a placebo courage. Don't worry, you won't suffer, knowing full well they would be captured. While Princip is retching in one corner, reports are coming in about the other assassins. It's a comedy of errors. Trifko Grabek, another one of the armed students, panicked and ran. He ditched his bomb and gun in a public toilet, where they were found later, and tried to flee the city. He was caught a few days later at a checkpoint, because his papers were not in order. Vaso Kuberlevio, the youngest, just walked away. He blended into the crowd, terrified. He survived the war, became a history professor, and eventually served as a minister in Tito's government in Yugoslavia. He lived until 1990, a walking ghost of the event that defined the century. But in this police station, the focus is on Princip. A doctor is brought in, not to comfort him, but to ensure he doesn't die before he can be questioned. They pump his stomach. It is a brutal, invasive procedure. You watch as they force water down his burned throat. He heaves again. A quirky, fringe tidbit about the interrogation. Princip was incredibly protective of his fellow conspirators initially, but he was also strangely chatty about his motives. He didn't see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as a tyrannicide, a noble killer in the tradition of those who assassinated Caesar. He told the police, "I am not a criminal, for I destroyed a bad man. I thought I was right." He genuinely believed that once the Archduke was gone, the Austro-Hungarian Empire would crumble peacefully and freedom would ring. He had zero concept of the geopolitical machine he had just smashed. The interrogation continues for hours. The police strip him of his clothes to search for more weapons. They find his wallet, a few coins, and some scraps of paper with poems. He is a student, a reader, a dreamer, and now a murderer. You step back into the hallway of the police station. The mood is shifting from panic to dread. The telephone is ringing off the hook. "The Konak," an officer whispers, holding the receiver against his chest. They say he is not moving. The reality is setting in. This isn't just an attempt anymore. This is a successful regicide. You walk out of the station, leaving the retching assassin behind. The sun is still shining outside, but the light feels different now. It feels harsh, exposing. The city of Sarajevo is holding its breath. The shops are closing shutters. The people are hurrying home. They know that when the empire gets hurt, it lashes out. You make your way toward the Konak, the governor's residence. The motorcade headed there. You need to see the end of the story. You need to see the last moments of the man who said, "It is nothing." As you walk, you think about the irony of the poison. If it had worked, Princip would be a dead martyr, a silent symbol. Because it failed, he will become the face of the war. He will sit in a prison cell for 4 years, watching the world burn from behind bars. He will die of tuberculosis in April 1918, weighing less than 90 pounds, having lost an arm to the disease just months before the war ends. He will live just long enough to see the total destruction of the civilization he attacked, but he will never see the freedom he dreamed of. But that is the future. Right now, he is just a sick boy in a dirty cell, wishing he was dead. You reach the gates of the governor's residence. The guards are frantic. A doctor is running up the steps with a bag. You slip past the sentries, ghost-like, and enter the courtyard. The Gerf and Stift is parked there. The car is empty now, but the back seat is slick with blood. It pools on the leather, dripping onto the floorboards where the bomb bounced off earlier. It is bright red, oxygenated arterial blood. You look up the stairs. The couple has been carried inside. The final act of the tragedy is happening in a bedroom on the first floor. You climb the stairs, following the trail of red drops on the carpet. You are about to witness the death of an empire, condensed into the death of 2 people. The politics are about to stop, and the humanity, the painful, messy, heartbreaking humanity, is about to take center stage for one last moment. You are ghost riding in the back seat of the Gerf and Stift as it hurtles down the Appel Quay. The wind is whipping around the open cabin, tearing at the ostrich feathers on the Archduke's helmet. The engine is roaring, finally unleashed, pushing the heavy chassis to its limit. To the casual observer on the sidewalk, it looks like a desperate escape. To you, sitting inside the kill zone, it looks like a funeral procession moving at 40 miles per hour. General Podiorik, sitting on the jump seat, is still shouting directions to the driver. He is running on pure adrenaline. He glances back at the royal couple. At first glance, they look remarkably composed. They are sitting upright. They aren't screaming. Podiorik allows himself a split second of relief. They missed, he thinks. Thank God, they missed again. But then, the car hits a pothole or a bump in the road. The jolt dislodges the fragile equilibrium of the dying. A thin, dark stream of blood bursts from the Archduke's mouth. It spills down his chin, staining the gold braid of his collar. It is a shocking, vibrant red against the cornflower blue of his tunic. Sophie sees it. Her eyes go wide. For God's sake, what has happened to you? She screams. It is the last thing she ever says. As the words leave her lips, the internal hemorrhaging from her severed gastric artery overwhelms her. She loses consciousness instantly. She doesn't slump forward. She slides sideways, collapsing heavily across her husband's lap. General Podiorik thinks she has fainted from the shock of the noise. She has swooned, he yells. But Franz Ferdinand knows better. He is a hunter. He has seen death 1,000 times in the forests of his estates. He knows what a fatal wound looks like. He ignores the blood gushing into his own windpipe. He ignores the burning pain in his neck. He reaches out a trembling, white-gloved hand to support his wife's head. "Sophie, Sophie." He gasps, the blood bubbling with every syllable. "Don't die. Stay alive for our children." You are witnessing the raw, beating heart of this tragedy. This isn't a political statement. It isn't a speech about the empire. It is a father begging the mother of his children not to leave them alone. Count Harek, the owner of the car, has finally realized the magnitude of the horror. He reaches over from the front seat to hold the Archduke upright, grabbing him by the collar of his uniform. "Is your Imperial Highness suffering?" Harek asks, his voice cracking. Ferdinand stares straight ahead. His eyes are glazing over, losing their focus on the world. He is retreating into that gray fog where pain ceases to matter. "It is nothing," he whispers. "Isis knits." He says it again, weaker this time. It is nothing. And again, it is nothing. He repeats it 6 or 7 times. It is the mantra of the Habsburgs. It is the denial of weakness. It is the refusal to admit that a 19-year-old boy with a sandwich and a pistol has just dismantled the heir to the throne. The car speeds on, carrying a dead woman and a dying man, while the Archduke whispers his denial into the wind. The car screeches to a halt in the courtyard of the Connaught, the governor's residence. It is a chaotic scene. Soldiers run to the vehicle. Servants rush out. "Help the Duchess," someone shouts. "She has fainted." They lift Sophie out of the car first. They assume she is just unconscious. They carry her hurriedly up the stairs and into the governor's bedroom, laying her on the bed. But as they lay her down, they see the blood soaking through her white silk dress, pooling around her waist. She is already gone. Then they turn to the Archduke. He is still sitting in the car, propped up by Herrick. He has fallen silent. His head is lolling on his chest. They try to lift him. He is a heavy man, dead weight in every sense of the word. They struggle to get him out of the car and up the stairs. They carry him into a room adjacent to where Sophie lies. They lay him on a chaise lounge. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. This is where Ferdinand's vanity becomes his final enemy. Remember the tunic? The one he had sewn himself into to look slimmer? The doctors rush in, regimental surgeons, with hands shaking from stress. They try to unbutton his coat to find the wound. They can't. The tunic is fitted so tightly, and the buttons are so stiff with blood and starch, that they cannot open it. They have to call for scissors. They have to hack the uniform off his body, cutting through the heavy wool and gold braid to expose the neck. By the time they finally get the collar open, the blood flow has stopped, not because they fixed it, but because his heart has stopped pumping. You stand in the corner of the room. It smells of iron and old dust. The sounds of the panicked doctors, compression, get me water, fade into the background. The Archduke lies there, his chest bare, his glorious uniform in tatters on the floor. The green feathered helmet sits on a side table, looking absurdly cheerful. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Did the Archduke receive the last rites? A priest, Father Puntigam, was reportedly in the vicinity, or called immediately. Some accounts say he arrived just in time to administer absolution in extremis, while Ferdinand was still breathing. Others argue the Archduke was already clinically dead when he was carried up the stairs, and the rites were performed on a corpse. For a deeply Catholic man like Ferdinand, who went to Mass daily, the idea of dying without the sacrament would have been his greatest fear. You watch the priest mumbling Latin over the body, the holy oil glistening on the Archduke's forehead, but the eyes staring back are empty. A quirky fringe tidbit about the timeline. The entire assassination, from the first shot to the death of the Archduke, took less than 20 minutes. At 10:30 a.m., he was alive and angry at the town hall. By 11 a.m., he was a corpse in the governor's bedroom. History doesn't always move slowly. Sometimes it falls off a cliff. The room falls silent. The doctor steps back. He pulls a sheet over the Archduke's face. "He is gone," the doctor says softly. Across the hall, the door to the other bedroom is open. You can see the white shape of Sophie's body on the bed. They are together again, in death as they were in the car. You walk over to the window of the Connaught. You look out at the city of Sarajevo. The sun is still shining. The river is still flowing. The people in the market are still buying fruit, unaware that the era of peace has just ended. The telegrams are already being written. The telegraph wires are beginning to hum. The message is simple. The heir is dead, but the implications are infinite. You look back at the bodies. They look small now. Just two middle-aged people who took a wrong turn. The majesty is gone. The politics are gone. All that remains is the silence. But outside, the noise is building. The riots are starting. The storefronts are smashing. The grief is turning into rage, and the rage is turning into policy. You step away from the deathbed. The personal tragedy is over. The global tragedy is about to begin. The dominoes are lined up, stretching from this room in Sarajevo all the way to St. Petersburg, Berlin, Paris, and London. And the first domino has just tipped over. While the bodies of the Archduke and the Duchess are still cooling in the governor's residence, the city outside is exploding. The shock of the assassination hangs in the air for perhaps an hour of brief, stunned silence before it curdles into blind, directed rage. You step out of the Konak and onto the streets of Sarajevo. It is late afternoon now. The sun is lower, casting long, bloody shadows across the city. The police have lost control, or more accurately, they have stopped trying to keep it. The anti-Serb riots have begun. It starts with a few shouted insults and a broken window. It ends with the total destruction of the Serbian community's economic life in the city. You watch as a mob, led by Croatian nationalists and Muslims loyal to the empire, descends on the Hotel Europa. It is the finest hotel in the city, owned by a prominent Serb merchant. They don't just loot it, they dismantle it. You hear the sickening crunch of wood as furniture is thrown from the balconies. Fine china shatters on the pavement. Beds, linens, and cash registers are piled in the street. The mob moves like a swarm of locusts, fueled by the rumor that the assassination was a broad conspiracy, that all Serbs are guilty. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. The Sarajevo riots of June 1914 were a prelude to the ethnic violence that would tear the Balkans apart for the next century. The Austro-Hungarian authorities did almost nothing to stop it. In fact, General Podiorik, the man who failed to protect the Archduke lightly, encouraged the violence to deflect blame from his own incompetence. By turning the anger toward the Serbs, he hoped Vienna would notice that he was the one who forgot to tell the driver to go straight. While the glass is breaking in Sarajevo, the invisible wires of the world are humming. The telegraph lines are pulsing with the news. Heir apparent assassinated. Sophie dead. Assassin captured. The message travels over the mountains, under the sea, and across the plains. It arrives in Vienna, the beating heart of the empire. You travel along the wire, leaving the dusty chaos of Bosnia for the stifling, velvet-draped silence of a Hofburg palace. It is a different world here. It is a world of ticking clocks and whispered conversations. The telegram is delivered to Emperor Franz Joseph. He is 83 years old. He has been emperor since 1848. He is a living fossil, a man who remembers the days of muskets and candlelight, now living in the age of machine guns and electricity. He is sitting at his desk, working on files when the aide delivers the blow. You might expect him to weep. You might expect him to rage. After all, his nephew and heir has just been murdered. But Franz Joseph does not cry. He reads the telegram. He sets it down. He looks out the window. For me, it is a great worry less, he reportedly says to his daughter later. Or, in the more famous version, a higher power has restored that order which I generally could not maintain. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit about the family dynamic. The emperor hated Franz Ferdinand. He hated his politics. Ferdinand wanted to federalize the empire and give the Slavs more power. He hated his marriage to Sophie, whom he considered common trash. He hated his stubbornness. In the emperor's eyes, Ferdinand's marriage had polluted the pure Habsburg bloodline. By dying, Ferdinand had conveniently removed himself from the succession, allowing the crown to pass to the young, pliable Archduke Karl. So, the emperor's reaction to the start of WW, I wasn't grief. It was relief that the family tree had been pruned. But while the emperor is relieved, the generals are ecstatic. You move from the emperor's study to the war ministry. Here, the mood is electric. Chief of the General Staff, Konrad von Hetzendorf, has been trying to start a war with Serbia for years. He has proposed invading Serbia something like 25 times. Every time, he was told no. Now, he has his excuse. He has a bloody shirt. He has a dead archduke. This is not the crime of a single fanatic, Conrad declares. This is a declaration of war by Serbia. The diplomatic machinery begins to turn. It is a slow, grinding noise, like a heavy iron door being dragged open. This brings us to the most debated document in the history of the war, the blank check. Vienna wants to crush Serbia, but they are afraid of Serbia's big brother, Russia. They can't attack unless they know Germany has their back. So, they send a telegram to Berlin. Kaiser Wilhelm II, the erratic German emperor, is outraged by the murder. Ferdinand was one of his few friends. Without consulting his government, without thinking about the logistics, he sends a message back. Germany will stand by Austria-Hungary through thick and thin. You should attack now, while the world is sympathetic. This is the blank check. It is essentially Germany saying, do whatever you want, and if Russia attacks you, we will fight them. It is the permission slip for Armageddon. You watch the diplomats packing their bags. It is July now. The July crisis has begun. But strangely, the world doesn't panic immediately. It goes on vacation. The Kaiser goes on a cruise to Norway. The French president goes to Russia. The British cabinet is worried about Ireland. Nobody thinks a war is actually coming. They think it's just another Balkan skirmish. But in the dark rooms of Vienna, the ultimatum is being drafted. It is designed to be rejected. They are writing a list of demands so humiliating that no sovereign nation could accept them. They demand to send Austrian police into Serbia to investigate. They demand the suppression of newspapers. They demand the arrest of officers. They are writing a suicide note for Europe. You stand in the telegraph office in Vienna. It is quiet. The clerks are tapping out messages in Morse code. Tap, tap, tap. Each tap is a soldier being mobilized. Each tap is a train being scheduled. Each tap is a shell being loaded. Back in Sarajevo, the riots have burned themselves out. The streets are littered with debris. The Hotel Europa is a shell. The Archduke's body has been embalmed and is being put on a train for the coast. He will be brought back to Vienna, but even in death, the Emperor will snub him. A final fringe detail about the funeral. Franz Joseph refused to give Ferdinand a state funeral. He was buried in a private crypt at Artstetten Castle, not the imperial crypt in Vienna. Sophia's coffin was placed on a lower level than his to show her inferiority, even in the grave. The Emperor didn't attend. The German Kaiser didn't attend. It was a third-class funeral for the man whose death started a first-class war. You watch the train pull away from Sarajevo, carrying the bodies back north. The city is left behind, bruised and battered. The sandwich shop, or deli, on the corner is closed. The bridge is empty. The fuse has been lit. It is a long fuse. It will burn for exactly 1 month, from June 28th to July 28th, but it is burning. And you, standing in the silence of the telegraph office, can hear the hiss. You are now standing at the end of the line. The month of July 1914 has evaporated in a haze of diplomatic failures, encrypted telegrams, and summer vacations taken by leaders who were sleepwalking toward the abyss. The bodies of Ferdinand and Sophie are cold in their crypt. Gavrilo Princip is chained to a wall in a Verzianstadt prison. But before we close the book on this tragedy, we have to deal with the legacy. We have to talk about the sandwich. You are standing in a modern supermarket. It is 2024, or whenever you are listening to this. You are looking at the deli counter. There are pre-packaged subs, paninis, and wraps. It is mundane. It is boring. And yet, this food item has become the enduring symbol of the assassination. Why? Here is the sandwich myth in its full glory. The assassin failed, went to buy a sandwich to console himself, and the Archduke happened to park right in front of him while he was eating. It is a perfect story. It combines the high stakes of empire with the low stakes of lunch. It suggests that the slaughter of 20 million people in the trenches of the Somme and Verdun was caused by a random act of gluttony. It makes the universe feel chaotic, absurd, and funny in a dark way. But as we discussed, it's almost certainly false. The sandwich detail likely appeared in a novel or a documentary decades later and was amplified by the internet. In 1914 Sarajevo, Princip probably just stood there, hungry and seething, without the prop comedy of a ham on rye. However, the truth is actually more terrifying than the myth. A sandwich implies luck. The reality implies incompetence. The war didn't start because of a sandwich. It started because of a system so rigid, so terrified of losing face, and so eager for violence that it couldn't stop itself. It started because the Archduke was too vain to wear a bulletproof vest, which existed in crude forms, or cancel the visit. It started because General Podiorik was too arrogant to secure the route. It started because a driver wasn't told to go straight. It started because the cyanide was expired. It started because the Kaiser wrote a blank check. The sandwich is just our way of coping with the horror. It's easier to blame a random coincidence than to accept that our leaders, our systems, and our institutions are fragile and prone to catastrophic failure. You look at the map of Europe. In 1914, it was a patchwork of empires: Austria-Hungary, the Ottomans, the Romanovs in Russia, the Hohenzollerns in Germany. 4 years later, they were all gone. The Romanovs, shot in a basement. The Hohenzollerns, exiled. The Ottomans, carved up. The Habsburgs, dismantled. Princip wanted to free the South Slavs. He succeeded, in a way. Yugoslavia was born from the ashes. But the price was a continent soaked in blood. The assassination led to the ultimatum, which led to mobilization, which led to the invasion of Belgium, which led to British intervention, which led to the trenches, which led to the tank, the gas mask, and the shell-shocked generation. And it all leads back to that corner, to that stall, to that boy. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. The actual car, the Gurf and Stift, is displayed in the Museum of Military History in Vienna. You can go see it today. It still has the bullet hole in the side. The uniform, the blue tunic that had to be cut off, is there too, stained brown with old blood. And the gun, the Browning M1910, is there. These physical objects are the unholy trinity of the 20th century. They are the relics of the religion of war. But there is one final fringe tidbit to leave you with. Gavrilo Princip died in prison in April 1918, just months before the war ended. He was buried in an unmarked grave, but one of the soldiers who buried him drew a map. After the war, his bones were dug up and reburied in Sarajevo in a hero's chapel. Today, in Sarajevo, there is a plaque on the corner where he stood. For decades, it read, "From this place, Gavrilo Princip initiated freedom." During the Bosnian War in the 1990s, the plaque was smashed. A hero became a terrorist again. Then it was replaced with a neutral factual statement. The meaning changes. The history shifts, but the dead remain dead. You step back from the corner of Franz Joseph Street one last time. The ghosts are fading. The Archduke is gone. The assassin is gone. The empire is dust. But the lesson remains. We are always just one wrong turn, one stalled engine, one failure of communication away from the cliff edge. The world feels solid, just like the Gurf and Stift felt solid. But it is fragile. The engine is running. The driver is confused. And somewhere, on a corner, someone is waiting. You are drifting away from Sarajevo now. The heat of that June day is dissipating, replaced by the cool, neutral air of the present. The noise of the crowd, the cheers, the screams, the grinding gears fades into a soft, white static. You are floating above the timeline. You see the 20th century stretching out like a dark river, twisting and turning, but it's far below you now. You are safe from it. You are safe from the trenches, safe from the politics, safe from the chaos. Let the tension in your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. That stiff collar of the Archduke's uniform is gone. The heavy wool coat of the assassin is gone. You are just you, in your own time, in your own space. The world is quiet. The telegraph wires are silent. The guns are cold. Think about the silence of the museum in Vienna where the car sits. It's a peaceful silence. The object has lost its power to hurt. It is just metal and leather now. It is sleeping, and you can sleep too. Let the darkness wrap around you like a heavy velvet curtain. Not a trap, but a comfort. A place where there are no wrong turns, only rest. The engine has stopped. The journey is over. The history is written, and it cannot touch you here. Close your eyes. Let the dust settle. Good night, boring dreamers.